It has now been almost 24 hours after the crazy comments made by Jimmy Butler following the loss to the Indiana Pacers, really resulting in him demanding a trade. I'm here to break down if he's actually going to land out west and what that could possibly look like for the Heat and the possible suitor trying to acquire the star player in Jimmy Butler. Let's get right to it and break down all the news and break down, is Jimmy Butler going out west? Now, based off the reports, it seems like this is the best option for Jimmy Butler and the most likely. The reason I say that is because everyone out east, it doesn't seem like there is a team out east, I should say, that is going to go out and move mountains in order to acquire the star player in Jimmy Butler. If we look through the possible teams, the only ones that really stand out with the possibility to move assets to acquire Butler would be the Pistons, as well as a few other not so great teams with a lot of young pieces as well as draft compensation, but again, nothing that would really move the needle visually to acquire Jimmy Butler from the Heat. So we're going to look at what would happen out west. So shout out to Brett Siegel for posting this article. As it goes on to say, Jimmy Butler has requested a trade from the Heat. So what's next? New NBA trade deadline intel on clutch points, breaking down every single Butler scenario, as well as the latest on Cam Johnson and other key names on the market. So this article really just breaking down in depth what the Miami Heat and the teams out west and really overall in the league would look like trying to acquire Jimmy Butler. Where the Warriors, and again, we're going to focus on the Western Conference side of things in this video, but again, with saying that, it's going to really maintain focus on a few teams. One of them being the Golden State Warriors, a team that we've heard multiple times up to this point, whether it be in this past offseason or leading up through this point of the season, surrounding Jimmy Butler and the possibility of trading for him and possibly acquiring Butler, whether it be for Kuminga and a slew of other draft picks and players. Again, we've had this conversation. So Siegel goes on to say in his article, the Warriors and the Heat have held discussions with one another regarding Butler this season, league sources confirmed. Although mutual interest between Butler and Golden State exists, Miami has made it clear that Jonathan Kuminga is a player they would want to be included in the framework of a potential deal for their superstar forward, obviously Jimmy Butler. While there are conflicting opinions around the league as what Kuminga's long-term future looks like, the Warriors have not been eager to include him in trade discussions to this point. So this has really been the conversation all the way up until now. The fact that obviously if the Heat were to trade with the Golden State Warriors, we are obviously going to need a king's ransom in return, as well as regardless if it is the Warriors or not, or any team in the NBA, we are going to need a handsome return for Jimmy Butler. Now, with that, speaking about the Golden State Warriors, Jonathan Kuminga is one of the younger pieces on that team with the most upside, and because of that, it seems like he would be a key piece in that trade, something we've discussed at really nauseum up to this point, regardless of this video being involved or not. Now, Kuminga is young, he's very promising, but again, it wouldn't be one for one, obviously, for Butler. It would require Kuminga as well as someone probably like Gary Payton, Andrew Wiggins, and possibly some draft picks in order for the Golden State Warriors to go out and acquire someone like Jimmy Butler to really push the needle and put them in a position to win now, which is really what it seems like Butler wants to do, as he feels like his position on the Miami Heat is not being dominant anymore, and because of that, it's not going to work, and he would rather go elsewhere. Now, it goes on to say, or Siegel goes on to say in his article, when switching things up and looking at the Western Conference, the only other teams that could make sense as suitors for Butler from the surface level are the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Memphis Grizzlies, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Denver Nuggets. Neither the LA Clippers nor the Los Angeles Lakers would find it easy to take on this contract, and there isn't a chance Butler or the Minnesota Timberwolves want a reunion. Portland, Utah, and New Orleans aren't teams in a position to sacrifice their assets to rent Butler. Now, this is obviously a great point, as Butler still only has 1 year left on that 3-year deal with the Miami Heat. Obviously, that contract will translate if he is traded, and he will then have a player option, and he will result in being a free agent because the team will then change, rather it being from a team option with the Miami Heat. So again, this is really a loaner deal. You are going to acquire Jimmy Butler for the rest of this season. Now, This is a massive piece of this. Now, Jimmy Butler is going to get to free agency. If he were with the Miami Heat, he was obviously, or most likely, as it seems as of today, he would decline that player option, ending up with him going to free agency. So if the Miami Heat were to move him, it would be the logical decision in moving someone as valuable as Jimmy Butler for as many assets as they possibly can before the NBA trade deadline, before he gets to the offseason in free agency, where they would lose out on the ability to move him for goods in return. So these teams are thrown out there, and we're going to break down the reasoning behind these teams in just a second with another quote from Siegel in this article. But I will throw out the idea that saying that the New Orleans Pelicans aren't in a position to sacrifice their assets is very interesting. Now, the Pelicans have a lot of talent, and obviously a lot of it cannot stay healthy, specifically Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. Now, we're not going to get into this specific trade in its totality right now. But there's two teams I want to throw out there that are in the Western Conference that I would love to hear a conversation about and have a conversation about. If you would like to see a video on this, please comment down below and let me know this. But the Sacramento Kings and the New Orleans Pelicans. There's one player on each of those teams that I would love to see acquired by this Miami Heat team. For the Kings, we know who it is. De'Aaron Fox, the star guard from the Sacramento Kings that was a longtime teammate with Bam Adebayo. I would love to see him in Miami. You've heard me talk about this before. He would be a great fit. Defensive-minded point guard who can move up and down the floor at will, at a pace no one can compete with, as well as obviously the ability to score the basketball, but also the ability to facilitate the basketball as well as play defense. I would love that move for this Miami Heat team. Now, would it make sense for the Kings to go out and trade for someone like Jimmy Butler, De'Aaron Fox for Butler? No. A guard for a forward when they already have so much talent at that position, I understand. Keegan Murray, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, the list goes on. They have a surplus of talent in Sacramento. It's just not working right now. So if they decide to blow things up, look for Butler to possibly be a piece they look to acquire. Again, hypotheticals, just throwing it out there as a Miami Heat supporter, and really, again, just playing the game of hypotheticals. And then Siegel goes on to break down Denver and San Antonio. Before we get to that, again, the second name would be Zion Williamson from the New Orleans Pelicans. Yes, I know he has been a dumpster fire up to this point, being drafted out of Duke by New Orleans. Everyone had a huge promising being labeled around Zion Williamson. We haven't seen that up to this point. When he's healthy, he's dominant. The dude can do really everything you're looking for when you were drafting him. He can do all the boxes. He checks all of them off without a doubt at a high level. But again, if he can't stay healthy, if he can't change his diet, and he can't correct himself and be mature about being a professional athlete, obviously there are red flags there. But again, putting him alongside someone like Bam Adebayo with Kel'el Ware coming off the bench, I absolutely love the idea of Zion being in Miami. I think the culture could change him around. He would be brought in by Miami and really understand that, hey, if you don't change shit, you're going to be on the way out. That's just the way it is. If you prove yourself, you can be here for a long time, and we can be very successful. Again, just hypotheticals I'm throwing out there. Now, Siegel goes on to say in this article about Denver and San Antonio. Denver and San Antonio are two intriguing situations for different reasons. Since defeating Butler's Heat in 2023, the Nuggets have failed to live up to expectations. As a result, trade rumors surrounding Michael Porter Jr. and his future with the organization have appeared. While Denver has shot down all speculation regarding Porter's uncertain status with the team, talk amongst league circles still links a potential Butler trade to the Nuggets. This is a scenario that has been bounced around the league, dating back to the middle of December. So it goes on to say, the idea of the Spurs possibly holding interest in Butler is nothing more than speculation around the league that San Antonio wants to make a real push with Victor Wembanyama this season. Going on to say, with a 17-16 record, the Spurs are in a position to contend for a playoff spot in the Western Conference, with sacrificing some draft assets and potentially one or two of their young stars, or their young players, I should say, like Keldon Johnson or Jeremy Shokan, for Butler makes sense for the Spurs. So again, two different scenarios here, both out west with Denver and San Antonio, that seem intriguing and promising for this Heat team, as well as for Jimmy Butler. Obviously, Butler's been on the record about the teams he wants to play for if traded and when traded from this Miami Heat team, including the Spurs, the Mavericks, the Rockets, the Suns, the Warriors have been the four dominant teams, as well as the Mavericks, who in this article were labeled as not interested in making a move for Butler. So that is something to also keep in mind. Now, if we move on, the last quote from this, or the second to last quote that we're going to cite in this article, is the Suns scenario. And there it goes on to say, there is a clear path to Butler being moved to Phoenix in a deal involving Bradley Beal, except the Sun star has a full no-trade clause in his contract and doesn't hold interest in being traded to Miami, sources said. In addition to Beal not wanting to be moved, the Heat had hold no interest in Beal as a possible replacement for Butler. That eliminates 3 of the Butler's preferred destinations for the time being, leaving the Warriors as a key destination point. So, again, Mavericks not interested, Rockets not really interested, those two teams being at the forefront of Jimmy Butler's request list, and because those don't seem really like possible options, the Suns are now another option, and it doesn't seem like that is going to be possible either. Now, with that being said, I love the idea that this is already being shot down. Butler to Phoenix for Bradley Beal, and whatever else comes with him, I'm not a fan of. Bradley Beal is not going to replace Jimmy Butler. Bradley Beal is hard to stay on the floor because he's dealing with injuries. It's just the way the game goes. It's unfortunate, but because of it, his value and his availability, which is obviously his biggest ability is availability. That is not the case for Bradley Beal, and because of that, his value is diminished just a bit. Don't get me wrong, the dude can fill up the basket in bucket after bucket. 3s, 2s, driving to the lane, being a slasher, spotting up, shooting, knocking down 3s. It doesn't matter. He can really do it all. Scoring off the dribble, we've seen him do it. And again, now that he's in Phoenix, he's kind of getting overlooked in his overall skill and value due to playing alongside Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. So it's very interesting. I don't think this would be one of the moves that the Miami Heat really jump at because you'd be returning Bradley Beal for someone in Jimmy Butler, and it's not really going to move the needle. Now, the last thing from Siegel would be this. It is known that around the NBA that Butler would prefer a trade to Phoenix, Golden State, the Dallas Mavericks, or the Houston Rockets, aside from needing to tear apart their roster to make the money work for Butler. League sources told Clutch Points that Dallas holds no interest in pursuing this scenario right now. So again, I did have the quote. I didn't think I had it in front of me, but again, Dallas Mavericks not involved in this situation as of currently constructed. Things can obviously change by the day, but again, as of right now, the Suns not an option, the Rockets not an option, as well as the Dallas Mavericks, and because of that, the top 3 of the 4 options for the Jimmy Butler saga have been eliminated for the time being. Again, do not rule anything out. This is totally the newest information that we have up to this point, and because of that, things can still progress rapidly. Now, 2 things I'm going to quickly highlight. Bobby Marks, who we all know and love, he's been all over ESPN, especially during the offseason for basketball. He breaks down all of the contract situations, all of the cap room situations for basketball teams, and he goes one after the other, breaking them down in depth. He is phenomenal at his job, and he suggested that the Miami Heat shut Jimmy Butler down until the NBA trade deadline when he's actually moved. There's no reason to have him go out, get hurt, diminish his trade value with weak, half-ass production that we may have seen in that game against Indiana. It is not worth it to this Miami Heat team. If you know he's going to be moved, and you know there's no reason to allow him to continue to destroy this locker room and destroy the overall culture and the team chemistry amongst these players in this Miami Heat organization, send him home. Do not let him stay in the locker room and be the drama of this Miami Heat team if he's the sole piece really causing it. Now, you guys know I love Jimmy Butler. I wish this would never have happened. But again, because that it is, you have to address it on the head, and you cannot let it dictate how this team really plays out through the course up until the NBA trade deadline if he's actually going to be moved. And up to that point, if he continues to be a problem in the locker room, I could see how the Miami Heat would actually do this and send him home until he's moved. The last thing we're going to cite is from First Take this morning, where they had Shams on with Molly as well as Stephen A. and others, where Stephen A. made a very loud and dominant, really, quote, if you will, saying that the Suns should do everything in their power to go out and acquire Jimmy Butler. Send Bradley to Miami if that's what it takes, plus more to acquire Jimmy Butler, due to really the culture that the Phoenix Suns currently have, being labeled as soft and not as tough as they probably should be. And because of that, Jimmy Butler would obviously change that, as Jimmy Butler is a walking tough guy. That is not exaggeration. That is not sarcasm. Jimmy Butler is as tough as they come, and that's why we love Jimmy in Miami. And it sucks that he's now not going to be a part of this Miami Heat team. But again, we cannot let it hold us back. We have to act mature, and we have to act professional and make the business decisions, that are required in order to grow and move past this. Again, that'll be it for this episode of Heat Digest. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know down below if you guys want to see a breakdown of those two players in Zion as well as De'Aaron Fox for a possible trade scenario for Jimmy Butler. And I will see you guys on the next one.